They are absolutely going to go national with the mandates. It is going to affect every. I don't see the red states escaping this. But at the very least, in West Virginia, we are so far removed from everything that I really don't see enforcement as being possible.
Right. And it comes down to the county sheriff ultimately. Right? Is the county sheriff going to enforce these things? And one thing that I remember when the Virginia governor was making noise that they were going to try to pass legislation that was going to really curtail Second Amendment rights, a bunch of county sheriffs got together and were like, we will not enforce this, come at us. And at the same time, the West Virginia legislature, or at least one of the legislators there, was like, hey, all you counties in Virginia, if you don't want to do that, come on over here to West Virginia. And people act like it's such a crazy thing, but hello, why does West Virginia exist in the first place?
Because the Civil War happened.
Well, I know, but they had different political ideas and they split up. Like this is not an insane idea to have the states disassemble and reassemble in some capacity.
Yo, it's a meme, but I think Civil War is inevitable. I absolutely do. Because in Boston and Chicago, I know people in Chicago, because I'm from there. And a bunch of the people I know have been posting on things on Facebook like, I'm scared. They're going to force me to do this. Yeah. It's crazy to hear from people I know being like, what do I do? I'm going to lose my job. What do I do? They're going to make me do this. And it's just like, you have to leave. You have to leave. Y'all voted for this. That's the funniest thing. Some of these people are Biden voters, Democrat voters. Yeah. And with a smile on their face, they went in there and they rubber stamped Democrat. Now they're going, why is this happening to me? Because you voted for it. Because the people who voted for Ron DeSantis, I think they're pretty happy with their choice.
Dude, hair margin, though. Man, remember? He barely beat Gillum. Barely beat him. Imagine the difference in the national conversation, too, if Gillum had won and DeSantis wasn't a voice.
And then Gillum was found naked, drugged out.
Passed out at a gay orgy or something like that.
And it's crazy that you have Navy veteran.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Well, you just think about the kind of person you have to choose from in terms of leadership.
Right.
An irresponsible, partier, or a Navy veteran. And people almost went for the guy who was not a leader. Look, I got no issue with people wanting to have gay orgies and do drugs. I'm very libertarian. I'm like, this is what makes America great. You go off and you do your thing, and as long as you're not hurting other people, just, leave kids out of it, leave us out of it, and you do your thing and you be happy. But when it comes to leadership, I think we need somebody with leadership experience.
Yes.
And this state almost went for Gillum instead of DeSantis. There's a lot of things about I don't agree with everything DeSantis does. He's been criticized over free speech issues. But I would take the military veteran over the, drug abusing partier guy.
Don't you think, though, if it comes down at a federal level that DeSantis, he'll resist. Tennessee governor, they'll resist. West Virginia, they'll resist a federal. I mean, look, we already have in practice today across the country states actively resisting federal law.
That's why I'm saying Civil War, because look.
But marijuana hasn't caused a civil war.
This is different, dude.
But the concept is the same. The concept is the same. There's a federal law, and the states are saying no.
That's not the issue. I could care less. I'm sorry. I could not care less. That's the appropriate. That's the correct way to say it. I could not care less if California legalized every drug on the planet and then some. I don't live there. I don't care. It has nothing to do with me. But when cities start saying you must undergo a permanent and irreversible medical procedure, people flee those cities and they go to red areas. And some of these people are, normies. They're not going to be voting. Some of them might vote Democrat. But what you're doing is, right now in this country, what did Bill Maher say? There can't be a civil war in this country because the Mason-Dixon line would go through Nana's kitchen. Ha ha ha, says the audience. But that's because we had nothing but an ideological polarization. What the vaccine mandates are doing is creating a geographical polarization. Now you've got people like me who lived in the Philly suburbs who moved to West Virginia. Because I'm like, I will not comply or live under the boot of these despots. So I go to the place where everyone's like, we got guns, buddy. And I'm like, I would like some of those guns too, sir.
Let's go.
The people who live in these cities who say no to the mandates have been fleeing. And they're going to red areas. So now the ideological polarization where you've got people in the New York area who are mixed. Now, New York City is hard left. These are the people who gleefully all line up together to get on their knees to fillet the state. And then you have the people who are like, I ain't doing that. moving out.
Right. So my vector on this was federal law needs to be enforced. So there will be areas of the country who resist the enforcement of the federal law.
It's not the federal law, bro. It's the state laws. It's the local laws.
But you think that the Tennessee governor is going to be like, all right, everybody get vaxxed?
Why would he do that?
That's what I'm saying.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that Mayor Bill de Blasio is going to say, I'm going to take away your paycheck.
Yeah.
And then 20% of the city is going to say, we will leave New York City.
Do it.
Then you're going to have those 20% that lean conservative moving into more conservative areas, and the polarization is now geographical.
Yeah, it's accelerating.
Then
as
you
well.
get the June 2022 Supreme Court ruling on Roe v. Wade. The left seems to think Roe v. Wade is done for. And if that's the case, now you have hard leftist, overtly progressive or communist or socialist factions in cities, and red states that have become overwhelmingly red. And then you get a wedge issue. Blue states saying we are going to run, abortion clinics in violation of, federal law or whatever, and then you'll end up with people fighting over it. So have you heard my assessment on that regard, my potentialities I've stated about this?
No.
So NBC News, Slate, a bunch of left journalists said that based on the oral arguments on Roe v. Wade, on the Mississippi law, the Supreme Court will overturn Roe v. Wade June 2022. That's what the left believes. I don't know if it'll actually happen because, who knows, many of these conservatives are going to be like, well, it's settled law. But let's say they do. What does that really mean? Well, it means 12 states have trigger laws which will instantly ban abortion. Then you're going to have the midterms, and it's going to get rowdy. If a red wave actually happens, Republicans will absolutely put forth a bill to federally ban abortion. They absolutely will. And they will have the votes to do it. Now, I don't know if it's definitive. I'm just saying, if the Supreme Court does this, if there's a red wave, the Republicans very likely would do this. Joe Biden very likely would veto it. Then comes 2024. You now have geographically polarized regions. The cities have become overwhelmingly blue and subservient to the state, and the red states have become overwhelmingly libertarian and anti-establishment. And then you get a Donald Trump victory or a Ron DeSantis victory, and they say the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sign the federal abortion ban. And the moment they do, like John Podesta asked of the West Coast, you will see blue states start to act overtly in defiance of federal law and seek to secede, or maybe that's too much. Maybe modern sensibilities prevent them from doing it. I guarantee you, though, if we ever get to the point where there's a federal abortion ban, you will see blue states defy that, and then you will probably see conservative and Republican executive authority going in and shutting these things down, which results in a dramatic escalation of conflict. When you have geographical polarization, plus states defying federal law to the point where it's the issue of babies, and abortion,
Yeah.
I think it's very simple. When it comes to marijuana laws, you are not going to see a conservative be like, we have to stop these dispensaries. When it comes to abortion, you absolutely will have conservatives being like, we have to go in and stop them from killing babies.
Right. There is an interesting moral argument to be had here about making a union with somebody who has a different moral framework. For example, when the Union was being formed back in Revolutionary times, there was a lot of people, plenty up north, who didn't want to be in a country with the slave states.
Yep.
But there was a moral argument to be had, which is if we don't form a country with the slave states, they will then form their own country, and then their country will be based on this immoral thing, and it'll be left alone to prosper. And so the moral argument was actually to incorporate those slave states into the Union so that over time the idea of natural law and natural rights would be able to overcome slavery.
And that led to a civil war.
But that was a process that was set in motion,
Right.
and the Civil War resolved that issue, and then we resolved it, right? So there is a question. And
I don't think so. I think it resolved slavery in the sense that was it. And then it took a couple of years before we finally totally purged it. But the conflict of the Civil War has never stopped. It's really interesting how it's probably a bit reductive to frame it this way. But, just reading history and following the presidency and the elections, when I see, everyone's like, this is all because of Obama, when Obama got elected. And then I'm like, okay, so I read about Obama. And everyone's like, Obama got elected because of Bush. This is all because of Bush. Then you go back to 2000, Gore versus Bush. Then you go back to Clinton. There is always something that as a catalyst leads us to this moment of polarization. And I think it's fair to say that in many ways, the Civil War never ended. But I'll give you a better example to understand, the simplicity of this. It's not a complicated thing. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's very simple. There's this really great meme. It's not really a meme. It's kind of just like a tweet. And they say how geographical formations from the Paleolithic era affects modern-day voting practices. And what they show is that in the American South, there used to be a coastline which layered a bunch of minerals in a band across southern states. This created the most fertile farmland. So then when the plantation owners moved there, they brought all their slaves to this fertile farmland. Then, when slavery ended, and today, that area is overwhelmingly Democrat and always votes Democrat. So the people are pointing out how this geographical formation ultimately resulted in this band of Democrat voters in the South. So what I mean to say is, I read about the Civil War. I read about, was it 1872 or 1876, where they decided the president by committee?
I don't recall this one.
So this is, let me see if I can pull this one up. I think it was 1872. I could be wrong. It might have been 6. The 1872 election, let's see. No, maybe it was the next one. One of these elections was decided by committee, and it was because there was a dispute among the states as to which electors were real and which ones were like the legitimate ones, and this resulted in a compromise that ended the Reconstruction.
Boy, that sounds awfully familiar to a memo that I heard was written and presented to Mike Pence sometime in January.
It was 76, yeah.
Interesting.
It was a compromise between Democrats and Republicans. The Democrats, of course, were the Southern slave owners and racists. And, after the Civil War was over, you ended with the Union going and occupying the South in the Reconstruction era. And then this election happened, and it was so contentious that there was fear the Civil War was going to break out again. And so they said, what do we do to make sure that doesn't happen? We will compromise. And so they ultimately said, okay, Democrats. I think they gave it to the Democrats, right? Let's see, who actually became president? I think it was the Democrat, I'm not sure. But ultimately they were like, this will end Reconstruction. Or I think they ended Reconstruction in exchange for the Republican getting it. I can't remember. I was reading it before, yeah, James Buchanan, all this stuff. So anyway.
It says it was the second of 5 presidential elections in which the person who won the most popular vote did not win the election.
Yeah. The results of the main election, blah, 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 blah. Second of 5, person didn't win the popular
High quality
vote.
content.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
It's Wikipedia, I mean.
So there we go, electoral disputes and the compromise of 1877. So I started reading about this, and then I'm like, oh, wow, they were still fighting. Then you read about how the Democrats, fought back after losing the Civil War with the Klan. Then you read about how this resulted in the civil rights, like this ultimately brought us the civil rights era, and how the Democrats decided to change their strategy in other ways. And history is really dependent upon which political tribe you believe in. The Democrats will tell you that it's at this point in the civil rights era that Democrats realized the folly of their ways and decided to help those who are minorities because that was the path towards winning, and the Republicans adopted the Southern strategy and decided to start working with the racists, and I don't believe that's true.
I don't either.
The other idea, which is a bit more conspiratorial, is that Democrat politicians realized the path towards suppressing minorities and maintaining their racism was to control these groups, and thus they felt that was their path forward.
I mean, Matt Stoller, we've talked about Matt before.
Yeah.
He wrote an amazing book where he outlined, I believe the guy's name was Fred Dutton, I could be wrong on that, where he was a Democratic strategist in the 60s, and he wanted to capture the vote of minorities and homosexuals and independent women and feminist women because he believed that was the way to gain power, and they wanted to become anti-white male. And that was the turn that happened in the 60s and the 70s, and we still see that play out today. I mean, the stats are really freaking clear.
Who was that? They ran against who was that? It was the landslide. It wasn't. It was who ran against Nixon?
Goldwater?
No. No. Reagan Mondale, I think. Right?
Reagan Mondale, yeah.
Mondale was the guy who was like, I'm going to form a coalition of the minorities and the women and the downtrodden, and then he got like obliterated in the election. Here's what people need to understand about these elections. So this wasn't 1980. This was 1984, right?
I think so.
So here's what people really don't get about what a 49-state landslide is. 1984 election. Come on.
Was it Minnesota, I think?
It was the one.
Look at all these.
Yeah.
Wikipedia's got everybody. Was it? Where's United States? Come on, Wikipedia. There we go. United
Why
States.
is this so different?
Presidential election. There we go.
Yeah,
Yep.
Minnesota.
Yep. It was Walter Mondale and Reagan. And you know what people don't realize first? When I say 49-state landslide, what do people imagine? Then out of 100 million people, 90 million people voted one direction, and everyone's cheering and celebrating and saying, this is the guy we wanted, and we all in agreement, this country is unified.
Yeah, it wasn't
No,
like that, was it?
It wasn't like that at all. And so younger people don't get this. Ronald Reagan got 54 million votes to Walter Mondale's 37 million.
Right.
It was 58% to 40%. So
Decisive, absolutely decisive. In the era where we're used to things being 48 to 48 and decided by 77,000 votes and whatnot.
this is nearly almost half the country opposing Ronald Reagan, but 49 states granting their electoral votes
Abolish
to
the
him.
Electoral College.
That's right. Well, I mean, this is why.
Yeah.
Because these 49 state landslides tend to favor Republicans. This is one of the... You're making a face like it's not true.
No, I think statistically speaking, it could favor either party, but historically
hasn't.
speaking, right,
It's been Nixon, it's been Reagan.
right,
I
interesting.
think, was it Nixon? Weren't there 3 49 state landslides in
Look,
history?
we are a union of states. I believe in that. I mean, the question, this comes up every election, right? It's like, but the question we need to ask ourselves is like, how would you induce states into a union today? You have to give them power.
Yeah.
This is about keeping the union together. And this is what people don't understand about being hardcore ideological, even on a moral level, versus statesmanship and prudence. How are you going to actually get something done? And is it okay to make compromises on certain values here and there in order to have your primary values, or the one that's most important to you, have success? Statesmanship is an entirely different thing than being an ideologue. And statesmanship requires prudence, and prudence is difficult. Prudence, by its very definition, is about making tough decisions between two competing interests that you have. And that's what people are facing all across the country right now when it comes to, do I comply with this vax mandate? Do I have my kid take the vax? If he doesn't take the vax, then he can't go to school. If he doesn't get educated, then he can't get a job. If he doesn't get a job, et cetera, et cetera. Or do I stand up for this? I mean, this is why prudence is such a difficult thing to teach. It's a difficult thing to experience. Statesmanship is way different than just writing a book about theory and trying to say this is the way everything should be. Abraham Kennedy, for example, is not a statesman, right?
Right.
He's an ideologue. He's not a guy that knows how to get things done and make
And they're
compromises.
overt about it. They admit it.
Yeah.
There's I guess there's some interview where he says, we realized that everything was indoctrination, so we decided, why don't we indoctrinate?
Yeah.
I'm like, why? I get it.
I respect it.
That's the funny thing, too. Everything, is indoctrination.
Yes.
And it's funny how there's a lot of people calling for banning books in schools. I just found that really funny, the critical race theory stuff. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know if we really want to ban the books from the schools. We want to ban the praxis of the books.
Right.
The teachers should explain the books to kids. The stuff where it's got people performing adult activities in them, which they did have in schools. Yeah, that's a little different. We're not talking about ideologies. I don't like the idea of banning books because of their ideology. But I don't like the idea of teaching the ideology.
And what's funny is even the book burners don't even really think about that, because they're like, oh yeah, there's the book, the Marxist book is in the library, Communist Manifesto, Das Kapital, that's in the library. So is Adam Smith.
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody cares that they're both in the library. You can't have them both. If you're a book burner, you can't have both those books in the library. But it's all just weaponized.
How do you explain to a zealot? You know what I mean? I remember my whole life, there's never been a real issue, as far as I could tell, about, there's been some peripheral issues about prayer in school, it shouldn't happen. But most people were like, okay, public schools shouldn't do that. We get it. Fine, whatever. But now that's
a new thing, man.
But now we have prayer in schools. They're just contemplating on whiteness,
Right.
which, as far as I'm concerned, is no different.
Right. It's a really fascinating thing to see how the woke thing is really a religion with sacrament and ritual and visual representations and all of these things that echo religious experiences. And what it really tells me, which is something that I have learned over these last several years, is that God, man, you need it. It's there. You need it. There's a hole in us that needs to be filled, and we all yearn for some sort of understanding of the universe that makes us not feel insignificant. One of the most incredible things that I've discovered as I've been reading the Bible and praying and trying to understand and come to some level of faith is that instead of coming up with a model of the world to justify my behaviors or justify my actions or perceptions, there's a ready-made model that unites you do with the universe, with creation, with living a good life, with having good outcomes. And that is actually really comforting to know that the system's been in place for a long time and it works for a lot of people. And when you come across somebody that really believes and really practices, you can feel that energy come right out of their face. It's incredible.
It's true.
I don't think everyone needs religion or needs God, but I think most people probably need something. Like they need some version of this faith system. I remember I've talked to a lot of people about, like psychedelics and psilocybin and stuff like that, and they're like, man, people really need this stuff. And I was like, yeah, I don't think I do. Like the people say it's very good, it can open your mind. And I'm like, yeah, I don't think I need that to consider new ideas or change my opinions and be open to exploring this. Maybe that's just me. I personally don't feel like I need to have any kind of guiding faith force in my life. That being said, I do believe in God, but
That's why you don't feel any need for it, brother.
maybe that's it.
Yeah.
Maybe I guess people who lack that are lost and scared and confused.
Yeah, because if you think about it, you're just a lump of cells on a planet in a cold, dark, infinite universe. If you really put
But I believe
yourself in that
that's true.
it is. But if you put yourself there for no reason and no purpose, randomly by accident, well, yeah, life's insignificant, and you're facing the infinite.
But that's purpose. That's not God. You know what I mean? You can believe in God and still believe that you have no purpose.
I
People
don't know.
lack purpose. So maybe purpose is a better.
Purpose and meaning are two different things, I guess, huh?
Maybe some people find their purpose through God, and some people have nothing, and so they create purpose and ideology.
What's interesting is that mood follows motion, activity is life, and the Christians say, love thy neighbor. So if you love your other neighbor and you act it and you put it into motion and you become active in this regard, you get filled with a love and an energy that makes those questions go away. You just don't think about it because you're filled with good energy. It's incredible.
The cult members hope that once they purge people like you and I or everyone who's watching, they will have a pure utopia world. Because
Right.
I'll tell you, communism can work. It can.
Scale. It's all about scale.
No. But at a very, very large scale of even 1 billion people, communism can work. It's very simple. You just have to kill anyone who opposes you.
Right, exactly.
And so, literally, it means it doesn't work because
Right.
you have to kill everybody. But that's why they always do it. Because when the communists gain power, they say, what's stopping us from having everyone march in lockstep like worker ants? It's these free-thinking dissidents.
Yeah. My good friend Joe Norman, who is a complexity scientist and teaches people complexity science, you should check him out, Joe Norman. He's been on my podcast, Jack Murphy Live, a couple of times. What he's taught me is that everything is about scale. Everything is about scale. One idea can work at one scale and it won't work at a different scale. In my family, it is communist. From it's expected that I can deliver the goods and everybody else gets what they need according to their needs. And that's beautiful. And I love it. It's perfect. But as the scale gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you need a different forming algorithm or forming
it's
ideology.
simple, bro. Imagine if someone was like, a car is a tool that can go from point A to point B. I need to move 3,000 pounds of bricks, and I have a car. It should work, right? It's like, no, you need a different vehicle for that
Right.
process.
No, it's exactly right.
So if our goal is to move resources from person to person on a small family level, yeah, it's great. You're a commune. You're a family. Someone's the boss. There's varying degrees of who's in charge depending on what resources you have, and everyone gets what they need. But if you want to move resources in a large-scale civilization, you need capitalism. The funny thing is, the left doesn't know what the word capitalism means. And I think that's part of the indoctrination. Change definitions and you can confuse people.
Right.
So it's funny when you see leftists complain about communism but call it capitalism.
Right.
They complain about the state controlling resources and colluding with the powerful elites to dictate who gets what. And they're like, it's capitalism, man. It's like, capitalism just very plainly means, and I believe capitalism came from Marx anyway, very plainly means the private trade of goods,
Right.
meaning an individual can trade freely as they choose, period. We are not in a pure capitalist system, by the way.
Not even close.
Not
Yeah,
at all.
we're in a very constructed and controlled economy.
Right. Well, and the government works to pick winners and losers, and especially pick losers. We're feeling that. You can't even work if you don't do exactly what we say. this is an issue for sure. And of course, we've evolved into like an oligarchic state. It's corporate feudalism, and you don't even really going to own anything, which is what they want. Private. It's interesting. I had a conversation with Alexander Dugin, a Russian philosopher. People call him Putin's lapdog, whatever. He and I talked about this very issue, and he said that he wants to get rid of capitalism. And I was like, well, you know, you might not have a lot of fans over here in the United States if you keep talking about getting rid of capitalism. He's like, no. I don't mean get rid of private property. I just mean get rid of what's happened today, what capitalism has turned into. And that got my interest a little bit. And, you know, the guy's a little crazy, and he's got some seriously out there ideas, and he's done some probably pretty bad things. But he was interesting to talk to because, you know, he's an influential guy. And I can see how inequality, the concentration of wealth in the hands of very few people leads to negative outcomes. And of course, we would want more people to share in the bounty that we've created. But if you believe in humanity, if you believe in individuals, then you will believe in individual outcomes, and you will believe in differing outcomes. And the founders were very clear on this. Different faculties lead to different outcomes, and we need to preserve that.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.